Have you ever seen a creature that evolved into a joke? Hallucigenia is exactly that. It lived on the seabed 500 million years ago. Its body structure defied all common sense. When scientists first saw the fossils, they thought it was 7 or 8 animals that had died together. It turned out to be the same creature. Even more absurdly, it had 7 pairs of spines on its back, looking like a row of steel forks. But these spines were not used for defense. They were used for walking. The real legs were underneath its belly, soft and limp. The entire body was upside down. In 1977, when paleontologists reconstructed it, they even got the head and tail backwards. This erroneous version was displayed in museums worldwide for 27 years, until someone realized something was wrong. But the most terrifying truth is, as discovered by scientists in 2015, Hallucigenia was not an evolutionary failure. It was testing an extreme survival strategy. If this strategy had succeeded, there would be no humans on Earth today, because that Cambrian experiment determined who would dominate the next 500 million years. The story begins in 1911. That year, the Burgess Shale in Canada was excavated. What was buried inside left everyone stunned. It was the craziest dumping ground in the history of life on Earth. All sorts of bizarre, monstrous fossils were piled together. Among them was Hallucigenia, but no one knew what this thing was. It was too small, only 1 to 3 centimeters long. Even worse, its appearance was incredibly eerie. So eerie that it didn't even look like a complete organism. Until 1977, when the British paleontologist Simon Conway Morris decided to forcibly draw a reconstruction of this mass. The result? What he drew shocked the entire academic community. In that illustration, Hallucigenia looked like a steel brush on stilts. It walked on the spines on its back and used the limp tentacles on its belly to grab things. Simon Conway Morris named it Hallucigenia, which in Chinese is Guaidanchou. The name implies something that only appears in a hallucination. Once this drawing was released, scientists breathed a sigh of relief. Though strange, it finally looked like an actual organism. Consequently, this upside-down image was printed in countless textbooks and exhibited in museums across the globe for 27 full years. Everyone thought the truth had been found till a turning point arrived. In the 1980s, at Meishan in Changjiang, Yunnan, China, a large number of exceptionally well-preserved Cambrian fossils were unearthed. When the Chinese paleontologist Husheng Wang led the team to clean these fossils, he discovered a subversive truth. Simon Conway Morris had actually seen it upside down. Those long spines thought to be stilts were actually defensive weapons on its back, and the soft tentacles, thought to be decorations, were the actual legs used for walking. Each leg had claws at the end. It walked by regulating internal fluid pressure, a principle similar to a hydraulic system. This 27-year-long misunderstanding finally had a lead. But who would have thought there was something even more absurd coming? Which end was the head and which was the tail? Both ends of the fossil were dark blobs. It was impossible to distinguish which side was the head. Scientists looked at that round, bulbous object and thought it should be the head. But they searched for a long time and found no eyes, nor a mouth. What on earth was this? This question remained unresolved until 2015. A team led by Martin Smith from the University of Cambridge rescanned the fossils using an electron microscope. The results were jaw-dropping. That round head studied for decades was not a head at all. Instead, it was the internal residue discharged from the anus after the creature died. This is no joke. Paleontologists from around the world held numerous seminars centered around a glob of 500 million muruled excrement. They published hundreds of papers and created thousands of museum models, all while discussing its brain structure and feeding habits. The day the truth was announced, the entire academic community went silent, because it meant that the research of the past 40 years was not only upside down and hang Even the front and back directions were wrong. The real head was at the other end, slender like a noodle. It had a pair of simple eyes that could only perceive light and darkness. Even more startling, its mouth was practically a circular meat grinder. It was densely lined with tiny barbs, arranged like gears. Anything entering it would be shredded. More impressively, scientists found that these teeth were composed of a mixture of minerals, with a hardness exceeding even that of modern shark teeth. They were specifically for chewing the hard shells of invertebrates. It was essentially a miniature meat grinder from 500 million years ago. Now, we finally know what Hallucigenia looked like, but a question arises. How did such a bizarre thing survive in the cutthroat oceans of the Cambrian period? You must understand that the oceans back then were patrolled by Tumaturlong anomalocaris, roaming everywhere. There were also 5-8, Opabenia, and various superprototors running rampant. Yet Hallucigenia was only 1 centimeter long. Logically, it should have been eaten to extinction long ago. But it somehow lived for over 20 million years. Relying on the 14 hard spines on its back, these spines were hollow, as hard as steel pipes. Any predator wanting to eat it would first have to consider if its throat could handle them. It was like a meatball covered in toothpicks. It looked tempting, but who would dare to bite? Even more remarkable were its legs. Each leg was like an onion, with 2 or 3 layers of cuticles stacked together. New claws grew slowly inside the old ones, replaced through molting. This means it had mastered a backup system 500 million years ago. If any part was damaged, a replacement was ready to take over immediately. But the truly terrifying thing about Hallucigenia is not how strange it looked, but its position on the tree of life. In 2014, scientists discovered that its unique claw structure is one of a kind on Earth. Only modern velvet worms in tropical rainforests possess it. What does this imply? It implies that those slime-spraying velvet worms in the rainforests are the 500 million-year-old Hallucigenias, direct descendants. And since velvet worms are close relatives of arthropods, once this link is drawn, the entire truth explodes. Hallucigenia belongs to the Lobopodia, the very ancestors of arthropods. In other words, over 80 fun teram of animal species on Earth today, including all insects, spiders, crabs, and lobsters, can be traced back to this eerie-looking ancestor. The crab you eat is a distant relative of Hallucigenia. The cockroach in your kitchen is a descendant of Hallucigenia, saying hello. The butterflies in the sky, the spiders spinning webs, and the ants building complex societies, they are all offspring of this monster. But that's not even the most terrifying part. The most terrifying thing was what scientists found in 2015. After studying Hallucigenia's survival strategy, they reached a startling conclusion. If Hallucigenia had chosen a different evolutionary path back then, humans might not exist on Earth today. Why is that? Because during the Cambrian explosion, Earth was conducting a frantic experiment. All sorts of organisms were testing different survival schemes. Hallucigenia tested the extreme defense route. It invested all its resources into defense, filling its back with spines and its mouth with barbs. It lived low profile, never fighting for territory, quietly prospering in the seabed silt. This scheme was highly successful, allowing it to survive for over 20 million years in that dog-eat-tag era. The problem is, this route had a fatal flaw. It was too specialized. It could only eat one type of food, could only stay in one environment, and had no room for expansion. Meanwhile, some of its relatives chose diversified development. For example, the later trilobites differentiated wildly into tens of thousands of species. Some lived in shallow seas. Some dived into the deep. Some fed on plankton, and some on seabed sediment. As a result, trilobites dominated the oceans for 270 million years, while Hallucigenia vanished after the Cambrian. Scientists now understand that the Cambrian experiment was actually testing two routes. One was Hallucigenia's extreme specialization, doing one thing to the utmost. The other was diversified expansion, not seeking to be the strongest, but seeking to be the most stable. Ultimately, the diversified route won, because in the following hundreds of millions of years, Earth underwent several mass extinctions and constant environmental changes. Creatures that knew only one trick went extinct, while diversified species always found a way to survive. If Hallucigenia's route had won, then life on Earth would have been locked into extreme specialization. Every species would have optimized itself to the limit, but would also have become extremely fragile. Once the environment changed, they would immediately vanish. Lacking any adaptability or capacity for innovation, the reason humans could appear is precisely because our ancestors chose the path of diversification. From the ocean onto land, from 4 legs to 2, from the trees to the ground, every step was an attempt at new possibilities, rather than locking ourselves into a single perfect state. So, the story of Hallucigenia actually tells us a brutal truth. Evolution never follows logic. Species designed to be perfect often die out faster. Those who survive to the end are often the ones who don't look like much, but are flexible enough. That little grinning monster from 500 million years ago, with its strange body, is telling us surviving long is more important than being strong. Instead of taking one thing to its dead end, it's better to leave yourself multiple ways out. Next time you go to a museum and see a reconstructed model of a Hallucigenia fossil, don't treat it as just a broken stone. You are looking at an experimental subject that almost rewrote the entire history of life on Earth. Every spine on its body carries the traces of the Cambrian ocean. That eerie, smiling face seems to be mocking our obsession with perfection, while also showing off life's incredible creativity. This 500 million year led gamble ultimately determined that the one standing here watching this story is you, rather than a group of monsters that evolved themselves into perfect machines.